Sit down for a second because I need to tell you something before you turn in that notice. Terrence called me 11 months into his retirement, 59 years old, 31 years at the same company, a 401k sitting pretty at $680,000. He thought he'd done everything right. And then tax season came, and his accountant looked at him and said, "Terrence, why did you pull $90,000 out of your 401k in 1 year?" Terrence said, "Because that's where the money was." And that one decision, made with no plan, no order, no blueprint, pushed him into a higher tax bracket, triggered a Medicare surcharge he wouldn't even feel for 2 more years, and cost him close to $14,000 he didn't have to spend. Here's the number you need to hear before we go any further. People who retire without a plan for their last 5 working years hand over anywhere from $6,000 to $40,000 or more to the IRS, to Medicare, to unnecessary fees for absolutely nothing. Not because they didn't save enough, because nobody sat them down and explained the order things need to happen in. That's the hidden trap. It's not that you didn't save enough, it's that saving is only half the recipe. The other half, the part nobody talks about, is sequencing. When you pull money, from where, and in what order. Think of it like setting the table before you serve dinner. You don't just throw plates and forks anywhere. Everything has a place, and it goes down in a certain order, so that by the time the food hits the table, everybody can actually eat without chaos. Retirement is the same. If you don't set the table in the 5 years before you quit, you're going to be serving dinner off your lap. So here's what I'm going to show you today. Number 1, the 3-bucket system you need to understand before you touch a dime. Number 2, the exact order you pull money from those buckets so the IRS doesn't take a bigger slice than it's owed. Number 3, the one moving piece, Social Security timing, that most people get wrong and can't undo. Number 4, the healthcare gap that blindsides people who retire before 65. And number 5, the specific 5-year countdown checklist you're going to walk away with today. By the end of this video, you're going to know exactly what to do, in what order, and by when, so you walk into retirement instead of stumbling into it. Let's start with the plates on the table, because that's what your money actually is. It's sitting in 3 different kinds of containers, and each one gets taxed completely differently. Bucket 1 is your taxable bucket. This is your regular brokerage account, your savings, money sitting in a checking account earning a little interest. You've already paid tax on this money when you earned it. When you spend it, the only thing that might get taxed is growth, capital gains. Bucket 2 is your tax-deferred bucket. This is your traditional 401k, your traditional IRA. This is the biggest bucket for most people, and here's the part folks miss. You have never paid $1 of tax on this money yet. Not the contributions, not the decades of growth. Every dollar that comes out is taxed as ordinary income, the same as if it were a paycheck. Bucket 3 is your tax-free bucket, Roth IRA, Roth 401k. You already paid the tax going in years ago, and now, as long as you follow the rules, it comes out completely tax-free, growth included. Here's your rule of thumb. Taxable money is already paid for. Tax-deferred money is a loan you owe the IRS on, and tax-free money is the dessert you get to enjoy without asking permission. Most people spend their whole working life filling these buckets and never once think about the order they'll empty them in. That's like spending 20 years cooking a beautiful meal and then serving it in a paper bag. The ingredients were good, the presentation ruined it. Now that you know your 3 buckets, let's talk about the order you actually pull them from, because this is where Terrence went wrong, and it's where most people bleed money without ever realizing it. The general rule of thumb, and I say general because your specific numbers can shift this, is you spend taxable first, tax-deferred second, and tax-free last. Here's why that order matters so much. When you spend your taxable bucket first, in those early retirement years, your taxable income is often at its lowest point in decades. You're not collecting a salary anymore, you might not have started Social Security yet. That's a golden window. In 2026, a married couple can have a substantial amount of taxable income and still sit in the 12% federal bracket. That is prime real estate, and most people don't even know they're standing in it.
While you're living off that taxable bucket, something powerful is happening quietly in the background. You can do partial Roth conversions. That means moving small, controlled chunks of money from your tax-deferred bucket into your tax-free bucket, paying tax on it now while you're in a low bracket instead of later when required minimum distributions force massive withdrawals at 73 and shove you into a much higher bracket whether you want it or not. Save your Roth, your tax-free dessert bucket, for last, or for emergencies, or for those years when an unexpected expense would otherwise push you into a higher bracket. That money is flexible. Don't waste its power early just because it's easy to access. Here's your rule of thumb. Spend the money that's already taxed, convert the money that's waiting to be taxed while your bracket is low, and protect the money that's never going to be taxed again. That's setting the table in the right order. Plates down first, then the food, then dessert last, exactly when everyone's ready for it. Now let's talk about the piece of this puzzle most people treat like an afterthought, when really it deserves its own seat at the table: Social Security. Here's the plain truth. You can claim as early as 62, but for every year you wait past your full retirement age, up to age 70, your benefit grows by roughly 8% per year. That's not a maybe, that's close to guaranteed, cost of living adjustments aside. There is no investment on earth that's handing you a guaranteed 8% a year with zero market risk. Claim at 62 instead of 70, and depending on your full retirement age benefit, you could be locking in a check that's 24 to 30% smaller for the rest of your life. That's not a one-time mistake. That's a mistake that repeats every single month for 20, 30 years. But here's where it gets personal, and where a blueprint matters more than a rule of thumb. If you're married, the higher earner delaying benefits doesn't just protect their own check, it protects the survivor benefit for whichever spouse outlives the other. If you have health concerns or a family history that makes a shorter lifespan more likely, claiming earlier might genuinely make sense for you. This is not one size fits all. This is the one ingredient on the table you cannot swap out once dinner's been served. Once you claim, in most cases, that decision is locked. Rule of thumb: don't decide your Social Security claiming age based on what your neighbor did or what feels good this year. Decide it based on your health, your spouse's benefit, and your other bucket withdrawals working together. Because remember, Social Security income affects how much of your Social Security itself gets taxed, and it affects your Medicare premiums too. Everything at this table touches everything else. Isn't it wild how one decision people make in about 5 minutes on a government website can shape 3 decades of their life? So far, you've got 3 buckets: taxable, tax-deferred, tax-free. You spend in that order, using low bracket years to convert. Social Security rewards patience, roughly 8% a year, but it's a decision you can't undo. Now let's talk about the gap that catches people off guard the moment they walk out that office door for the last time: healthcare. Here's something nobody puts on the brochure when they hand you your retirement paperwork. Medicare doesn't start until you're 65. If you're planning to retire at 60, 62, even 63, you've got a gap, and that gap can be brutal if you haven't planned for it. Without an employer plan, a couple in their early 60s buying health insurance on the marketplace can easily be looking at $1,200 to $1,800 a month or more, depending on your state and your health. That's before a single doctor's visit. That's just the cover charge to walk in the door. Here's the part that connects right back to Section 2. Your withdrawal strategy directly controls your healthcare costs. Marketplace subsidies are based on your taxable income. If you pull too much from your tax-deferred bucket in those early retirement years, you can spike your income, lose your subsidy, and suddenly that $1,400 premium becomes $2,600. That's why the order you pull money in isn't just a tax question, it's a healthcare cost question too. And once you do hit 65, don't relax yet, because Medicare has its own trap called IRMAA.
the income-related monthly adjustment amount. If your income 2 years prior crosses certain thresholds, your Medicare Part B and Part D premiums jump, sometimes by hundreds of dollars a month per person. This is exactly what caught Terrence off guard. The surcharge showed up 2 years after the withdrawal that caused it, when he'd already forgotten what triggered it. Rule of thumb, the 5 years before you retire is when you map out your healthcare bridge, whether that's COBRA, a marketplace plan, or a part-time job with benefits. And the years right at 65 are when you watch your income like a hawk to avoid IRMAA. Setting the table means knowing who's sitting where before the food ever comes out of the kitchen. Here's what most people actually do. They give notice, they walk out with a smile, and a few months later a bill or a tax question pops up, so they log into the 401k and pull out a big chunk, because it's the biggest number they can see and it feels like their money sitting right there. They don't think about brackets, they don't think about Medicare, they just pull the amount they need and move on with their life. Then, 18 months to 2 years later, a letter shows up from Social Security or Medicare saying their premiums are going up, sometimes by a few $100s a month per person, and they have no idea why, because the withdrawal that caused it happened so long ago it doesn't even feel connected anymore. Here's what to do instead. Before you pull a single dollar in retirement, look at the whole table: your bucket order, your current tax bracket, your Social Security status, and your healthcare income limits, together as one decision, not 4 separate ones. Let's go back to Terrence, because his wife Yolanda is the reason the story has a good ending. Terrence was 59, Yolanda was 57, both hoping to retire within a couple of years of each other. After that rough first year, the $14,000 tax and Medicare surprise, Yolanda refused to let it happen twice. 2 years out from her own retirement, she built the blueprint the two of them should have had from day one. They mapped their 3 buckets, about $400,000 taxable and tax-deferred combined for Yolanda, plus a smaller Roth they'd been slowly funding. Instead of pulling randomly, they built a plan to live off taxable savings for the first 3 years, doing small annual Roth conversions of about $20,000 a year while their income was low, filling up the 12% bracket without spilling into the next one. They delayed Yolanda's Social Security to age 67 instead of taking it at 62, adding roughly 25% to her lifetime benefit. And they budgeted $1,500 a month for a marketplace healthcare plan for the 2 years before Medicare kicked in, instead of discovering that number by accident. Over 5 years, that blueprint saved them an estimated $22,000 in taxes and Medicare surcharges they would have otherwise paid, and it locked in a permanently higher Social Security check for both their lifetimes. Same income, same savings, completely different outcome, just because the table was set in the right order this time. Let's bring it all the way home. You've got 3 buckets: taxable, tax-deferred, tax-free, and each one is taxed differently. Spend taxable first, convert tax-deferred while your bracket is low, and protect your tax-free bucket for last. Social Security rewards patience at roughly 8% a year, but it's a decision you don't get to take back. The years before 65 need a real healthcare bridge, and the years after need careful watch for IRMAA. And your withdrawals aren't isolated choices. Taxes, Medicare, and subsidies are all sitting at the same table, affecting each other with every dollar you move. Set that table properly, in the right order, before you ever serve the meal, and retirement stops being something that happens to you and starts being something you actually run. Everything I just shared with you is for education, not personalized financial advice. Your numbers, your health, your family, that's all different from Terrence and Yolanda. Please sit down with a qualified financial or tax professional before making any big moves. Here's your one action for tonight. Pull up last year's tax return, find your taxable income on that form, and write it down next to your current tax bracket. That single number is the starting point for every decision we just talked about, and it's what we're building on next time. Drop the word blueprint in the comments if you want part 2, where I walk you through exactly how to run your own Roth conversion numbers. And if this helped you see your last 5 working years differently, hit subscribe, because I've got a lot more to sit you down for.